hired a master planning firm to work with our department. The firm is Activitas in conjunction with Pros Consulting. So we have some of those folks on the line, which we're going to bring in a moment. But essentially, the point of tonight is this was supposed to happen in person, but we're going to make do with the virtual meeting. They have a series of questions that they're going to put out to the commissioners, looking for you to kind of weigh in. The goal is to provide them with more data for their analysis and their planning purposes. We're in the collection phase, so they're meeting with commissioners, they're meeting with stakeholders, they've met with all the supervisors and some of our staff at this point. They're also doing community focus groups with the Board of Education, our sport community, nonprofit community, et cetera. So this is just kind of one step in the collection process. And then from here, after they've kind of heard everything, they're working on a statistically valid community survey, which is going to come out and further inform this plan. So really, you guys are kind of doing your part from the Youth Commission perspective, just to make sure that we're considering everything as part of this planning process. So tonight will not be the last time you hear about this plan, obviously, but it's really your first opportunity to kind of speak to some of your ideas and kind of get a dialogue going. So does anyone have any questions for us from a staff perspective before we bring in the master plan team?
No.
Okay, great. Austin, are you on the line?
Yep. I am here.
And Mark, Holly, I see everyone. Great. Did you hear us? Did you hear us teeing you off?
Hi.
We did. So, this is Austin. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yep.
I use my computer audio, so I always want to test it first. So my name is Austin Hostettler with Pros Consulting out of Indianapolis, and we are part of the master plan team. And tonight we're joined by Mark Novak and Holly Ganser. They're with Activitas. And so us three are representing the consultant team tonight. And thank you for accommodating. I know it's a little bit different. Every day is a little bit different, it seems like, too. So thank you for accommodating this meeting. And as Josh said, this is really the data gathering stage. And honestly, you're the first up. So you're the first group that we've scheduled, too. So we get to have this conversation with you all tonight. And we have some questions to go through. And right now I have you all on different tiles on my screen, but I know it's going to be smaller, but I can share my screen so you can see the questions if it's easier, if that's okay. Seeing some head nods, so I'm going to try to do that. Share. I'm going to share my second screen, so when you see me moving my head over here, it's because I'm looking at an entirely different screen. So is that up here on the screen for you all?
It does, but there's no question. Oh, there it is.
I'll zoom in a little bit. So Mark and Holly are, of course, helping facilitate. They'll also be taking notes as well. And so there's just a series of questions that we kind of want to go through. And in an ideal world, we want to hear from all of you tonight, but I realize not all of you might have input on every specific question. That's okay. But ideally tonight, we want to hear from all of you and your perspective and what you bring to the table. And so the questions that we're going through on the screen, there's about 9 questions or so. They range from like really specific to really broad. And so as Josh mentioned, this is really the data gathering portion of our process. And so we're not fishing for anything, and there really are no wrong answers because you're helping us build context so that way we know what this stakeholder group said and the next stakeholder group said and the next stakeholder group said, and what are those common themes throughout everything that's rising to the surface, and then what do we need to test with the statistically valid survey instrument to the larger Bristol populace. So you're really helping us figure out what is it that we need to bring forward and test with the larger community. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. So again, I'm gonna ask the question, and then I know it's a little virtual, so it might be a little bit hard to prevent speaking over somebody, but we're gonna give it a shot here. And so again, not everybody is probably gonna have an answer to these things, but ultimately throughout tonight, I would like to hear from everybody. And so the first question I have is, so it's kind of a multi-part question. So the first one is, are you a user of the park system? It always kind of helps us understand a little bit of the context and who you're talking to. But also, if so, what do you like about the system in terms of parks, green space, facilities? So kind of the built recreation environment. And on the flip side, what do you kind of like about the programs, services, special events, and in the indoor side of things too? So kind of a multifaceted question there, but it helps us understand a little bit about who we're talking to. So I'm going to open that up to the group.
And not all at once, please.
I can go if you. I can go if you'd like. This is Ryan.
Absolutely.
Been waiting for everybody else. It'll be interesting to hear from Ethan and Renee too, as two of the youth on the board. So I am a lifelong Bristol resident. I am a user of the park system. As far as the park programs, I utilize them much more as a youth in town. I grew up, you doing the youth athletics through the park and rec department, using the parks probably much more than I do as an adult. Currently, I use both Page and Rockwell. For I mountain bike at Rockwell Park. I've used the disc golf courses at both facilities, and spend a lot of time at Muzzy Field for different athletic contests. So that's kind of the extent of where I am right now. I've obviously been to the pool. I've never swam in it, but know how beautiful of a space that is, and so that's kind of my current status with it. Definitely use it much more as a youth and as an adult. I haven't done any park and rec programs, but I do use the facilities.
Awesome. Thank you.
This is Corey.
Hello, go ahead, Corey.
I use the park mainly with my daughter, so the playgrounds, playscapes. She engages in different park programs. So we did basketball through Parks and Rec. We did swim lessons multiple times, both at Rockwell and at Giamatti. So we've used the pool facilities in that way. She found some other interests. She learned she likes jujitsu through one of the park programs. So getting her interested in different things and also a place to go just to be outdoors is how we use the park as a family.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you.
I'll go. This is Lance Washington. Currently I have 2 kids. We utilize the park, or we did utilize the park all the time. My kids definitely like Rockwell and Page. We've done swim lessons multiple times. I think we did basketball. And originally I'm from Waterbury, and I don't think that the Waterbury park systems are as prominent as they are here in Bristol.
Sure. Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, this is Ethan Grabowski, and can you guys hear me well?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so because I'm still obviously
You hear
in high school, and yes, we hear
Having a hard
I
time
can hear
hearing
it.
him.
But mostly me and my friends, we do kind of like a smaller, well, not like a smaller, but a secluded area to hang out. And we use Page Park more than Rockwell, especially during winter time. We're not really a big fan of having a lot of people hang out, and it's too hectic. But during summertime, we would always play frisbee because there's so much room. And during wintertime, we would always go near the frozen big pond in Page, and we'd always hang out there. And we use it quite often, I would say. It's definitely a really nice hangout place that we would all go to. So I think it's great, the parks in Bristol.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, let me ask you all this question. So again, I told you it's a mixture between really specific questions and kind of broader questions. So the first 2 here are kind of really, really specific. So part of the master plan, so the master plan is a overarching wide view look of the department. So looking at finances, looking at land, looking at programs, looking at organization. and everything that we need to be doing as a department the next 5-10 years. But there is an element of our scope that is specific. And this is something in particular as well Activitas is really going to focus in on is Page Park. So the last comment we just heard is kind of a good segue to this question. We actually want to take a little bit of a deep dive look into Page Park itself. Not all system-wide master plans will do a deep dive into the park by park level of analysis, but there's a little bit of a hybrid for this particular project that we are doing. And so we wanted to ask you all a little bit about Page Park. So for those of you that have experience with Page Park, we kind of have a four-parter here. So one is, what about the existing park works? What does not work? What could be maybe improved upon? And then what amenities and programs are unmet that could be added to the park? So this is a very specific question to Page Park in itself. So let's start with, for those of you that are familiar with Page Park and use it, what about the existing park works really well?
I'll start. So this is Matthew Gutterwell. So I've been a lifelong resident of Bristol and used Page Park for a lot of the programs. And then I worked summer help for 5 summers doing maintenance on Page Park, mowing, weed whack, and all that type of stuff. So a lot of I know the pool is very popular, the basketball courts, playgrounds, everything seems to be working out very well. The one thing I would improve upon, and I've been saying this back when I was 18 years old doing maintenance on it, was the stage behind the playground. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but if that could be revitalized and maybe expanded upon, I think we can get a lot more outdoor programs using that stage area.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, Matt, I mean, this is Ryan again. The basketball court's always busy, the playgrounds, that's great to see. With, the introduction of the disc golf a couple of years back, it seems like that's bringing a lot of people from out of town to town too, which I think is a good thing economically, eventually, as we continue to develop downtown and get people here. That's a nice attraction. As far as something that doesn't work, I ran the Bristol Pony League baseball league for 15 years. And the scheduling was a challenge with this current configuration of the baseball diamond in the softball field. So you can't have a baseball game and softball game going on at the same time. It's unsafe. The right fielder for baseball is overlapping the left fielder for softball, and that becomes a problem. So I mean, I don't know the extent of this plan, but possibly reconfiguring the softball field to the opposite corner. You could better utilize those fields, because once there's one activity, you shut down that whole green space to anything else. Also really it's a beautiful building up by the pond, the lagoon there. That building is gorgeous. And I know they've done some pottery classes and art classes out of the different places. They have a kiln up there. But again, getting more residents through that building, I think there's a lot to showcase on that deck overlooking the water and inside as well.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you. Does anybody else have comments about Page Park in particular?
I think you took the most important step already in the renovations that are happening with the pool. That gets so much use because it's in walking distance to part of the community that doesn't have access to a pool otherwise. And that, I know there were like fires in the filter room and stuff. So right. That kind of renovation was long overdue. Those locker rooms were really a disaster. So I think we're already taking a step in the right direction. That was the focus. And I concur with folks about the pavilion and the little building that's used for crafts and theater and stuff. Those both could be utilized a lot more.
Sure. Anything else, Page Park?
I think my comments about Page Park, having grown up in the neighborhood adjacent to it, is that it's not a safe walking area. So I think that there's a discouragement among certain people, especially now with the traffic patterns, that they are distracted driving, that it's not a safe place to walk. So we're losing out on adjacent neighborhoods who just don't use it like they should in terms of the walking paths, unless they just enter on that south side by Ingram, where there is a path that is banned to vehicular traffic. So I think the circulation piece in terms of pedestrian traffic is one that is critical in terms of the redesign, and all of the activities that have been previously discussed by the Youth Commission members all need parking, and the parking piece is extremely difficult, and I think that that discourages full utilization as well. And lastly, I think that the buildings are underutilized and really could become something that were both probably revenue generation components, but also just better represent and have a better look to them in terms of representing what we can use them for. So from an aesthetic standpoint, from a utilization standpoint, and a maintenance standpoint, I think we need to do a better job.
Just building on that, Austin and group, one of the things I really personally like about Rockwell Park, especially in light of everything that's been going on, I've been going there quite a bit personally for the walking and running trails that go throughout that park. I think if we can have a feature like that at Page, I wouldn't really even think to go to Page because there's no real good trails. You know, if you could redesign and have trails that kind of go throughout that park, as we do at Rockwell, I think that could attract a different, different people to Page.
Absolutely.
That makes sense, Josh. And I think the parking piece is really important too. I mean, there's a lot of, busy summer night, there's cars parked on grass and over curbs and everywhere. So the addition of parking, I think, would definitely attract more folks there.
And Austin, I don't know, on your site visit to Page, I'm sure you saw up in the woods, there's like these abandoned basketball courts, turned horseshoe pits, like a hot mess in the middle of the woods. I think obviously something needs to be done there. I see that as an area of weakness or area that can be improved upon. It just seems like an abandoned thing in the woods.
Yep, I remember seeing that.
I think part of the struggle with Page also is just there seems to be like 3 different elevation levels, and so it's very segmented as opposed to kind of like a flowing park space. And so kind of meshing those 3 elevation levels together, I think would help with a lot of that circulation or walking paths, and kind of make it a cohesive park space.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I think the tennis courts are all fairly new.
Mm-hmm.
Those are highly used from both the schools and the general public, as well as the basketball courts. Those are always in use. The playground at the lower end is always in use. The pond for fishing is heavily used, especially for our fishing derby every year. And again, as Commissioner Hintz mentioned, the pool is a huge amenity there as well. So I think there's a lot of great amenities there currently. But I think the parking, the lack of walkability, some of the aesthetics could definitely be improved.
Anything else on Page?
No.
All right. And again, like Josh said, this is not your last opportunity to provide some input. So if something pops in your head a little bit later, we don't go away, so you can reach out to us. So knowing that you all are, this is the Youth Commission, so representing youth, we're going to kind of go back now to kind of some broad questions. But what do you believe the community's youth value most about Parks, Recreation, Youth, and Community Services within Bristol? So, I mean, you're kind of representing, the youth focus and part of this. So help us understand a little bit here about what do you think the youth value about Parks and Recreation Services in Bristol?
I think this is a great question for the youth, for Ethan and Renee to maybe start us off with.
Yeah, so personally, I think that the most valued part is just like the super large amount of space available and like mostly kind of like the privacy. Like we're able to hang out in an enclosed area with nature. Everything's like calm. It's not busy usually. And it's just like being more secluded instead of being in a large population. I mean, personally, that's what like me and my friends like the most. However, in school, a lot of kids use like the basketball courts and the swimming pools. So I would say it's kind of a toss-up. I feel like a lot of kids do like the privacy and just like the nature of it, and then also a large chunk of kids like all the activities that are there.
Sure. Yeah, so it's a little bit about aesthetics, but also about how you activate the spaces. So it's a little bit of a combination of the both. What else? What is valued about Parks and Recreation services in Bristol?
I think the programs are key. I mean, they would know more about it. But I think that the programs are usually filled up all for the most part over there. You know, it's always a hot spot for, you know, the baseball programs, the tennis league. I know everything is pretty much always booked. That's always good.
And not only the programs themselves, as our students get older, seeing some of our high schoolers applying for jobs and that opportunity to grow some of those skills, some of their first jobs be through Parks and Rec, whether it's maintenance, like Matt said earlier, or just help counseling, helping. I think is a good value for
That's huge. Building advocacy, but then also giving those opportunities for actual employment and kind of, you know, the experience on that side of things. It's kind of two different things to kind of bring up there. That's a good point. Those are good points.
I agree with that, Austin. I think, you know, really through 8th grade, it's students and youth utilizing the programs. I mean, the summer program, the summer fun camp is a sellout every week, I know. And so, you know, just that continues to be a fan favorite, as well as a lot of the athletic programs that the park does offer. I do know that, you know, over the years, a lot of times those athletic programs have shrunk, I think, due to just competition of other leagues and AAU and different types of things like that. But you know, there are kids right now that if they don't make the basketball team through the boys club, they don't have a place to really play anymore organized in the winter. There's kids who don't really have a place to play soccer in the summer if they can't be part of Bristol Soccer Club. And I'm not sure what the interest in that would be. I mean, I know it's tough to recruit for those programs too, but there are a lot of kids that aren't participating in those events anymore that I think work, because those aren't offered at this point. You know, but the value, and I think, you know, working at Bristol Central High School, which is on the Rockwell side of town, our kids value, as far as facilities, I mean, the skate park and basketball courts are the two biggest sales there, as well as the pools in the summer, as well as the programs. But high school kids tend to utilize the programs much less than the younger kids in town.
Does anyone want to build on from like the youth services programs or community services standpoint? Anything you're hearing in terms of value there?
You guys could all see
Steve is eagerly waiting to hear on that.
More people.
I think those programs all have value as well. See Rising Stars and helping kind of develop that advocacy piece and that leadership piece. I think those, I think just all of the services we provide to families in general are helpful.
Renee, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Well, I mean, I'd say like the programs definitely, like it's good to like go to, like if you don't make a team or something, like especially for like my age group, it's good, like if you don't make a team, like you can always go back to like the groups, and like you can always go to Park and Rec and do it too.
Opportunity. So it's the opportunity and access.
Yeah.
Let me ask you all this question, and this one, it might be a little bit different, but the reason is you all represent, you know, kind of different organizations or different entities, but you know, you come together on this commission. help us understand here, are there any policies or procedures or mandates that we as a consultant team need to be aware of for how programs and services are delivered in Bristol, like for youth? So in other words, context as to how the department is guided. Like an example, we worked in communities before that, a certain part of the tax dollars goes directly and earmarked towards youth programs and youth services. Like there's some mandates and there's some context in cities that say, an X number of dollars will go towards these initiatives. Are there anything, policies, practices, mandates that we need to be aware of for how Parks and Recreation programs and services are delivered in Bristol, and in particular to youth focus?
This is more of a question maybe for Josh, Steve.
I will say, I think from a youth services and youth and community services perspective, I think a lot of our funding comes through various grants, state, federal, et cetera. So it's not necessarily a policy, but we are very, contingent on receiving those funds year after year. Steve, I don't know if you want to add anything into that, but I think our fear is always that money eventually doesn't dry up. I mean, we're kind of facing that right now with our Pine Lake Adventure course. We had an educational grant that, started off as $125,000 every year. Over the years went down to $60,000, $40,000, and now it's not even coming to towns anymore. So we're having to take a look at that program and really figure out how do we keep it running without those funding. And that really extends to a lot of what we're doing at youth services. It's just that grant piece.
Right. In addition to that, too, is with the creation of the programs, we kind of have to survey and see what the need of the community is, and not just working with the low-income families, but kind of opening things up to have all youth participation and all family participation, and also maybe creating. I know for high school we have maybe 3 programs, but creating more programs for the older kids to participate and engage in.
Right. That's a good point, especially when it comes to age segmentation and what's the demographics of the population, but then how are our programs aligned to actually provide those experiences to those different age groups within the population.
And I also think one of the strong points with youth services is that the collaborations are really great with the Board of Ed, the police department. We collaborate really well on a lot of different type of programs. With the Boys and Girls Club, everything in town we kind of work really well with. So it kind of gives us that plus.
Perfect.
One thing I'll add in, from a park perspective, is our department is the beneficiary of 9 park trust funds and endowment funds, and there's a lot of, again, not necessarily a mandate, but language that is very specific as to how it can be used. So in terms of longevity for the department, I think that's a huge benefit to have that.
Absolutely. Okay.
Just a quick unifying thing, actually, to both the points that Josh and Steve made. The other thing to consider about the grant funding is the grant funding comes with very strict stipulations as to how that money can be spent. So if the department is mostly reliant on those funds, then to Steve's point about making sure that we're taking into consideration what our specific community needs, to a degree their hands can be tied if the needs of the community don't happen to match the requirements of the grant funds.
Okay. Could you elaborate a little bit if you know like a specific example, like is it physically demonstrate you're meeting a particular need or something like that?
Not that it's a problem area, but the state of Connecticut, funded through channels that come initially from the federal government, has the Youth Service Bureau grants and In the past couple years, there's been enhancement funding, and then there's also been a school-based diversion initiative that has come to Bristol as sort of a package. And the reasoning for that, from my understanding, is because it's part of a bigger initiative to deal with juvenile diversion efforts, which, as it happens, we do have a significant amount of those that we need to attend to, but the only point in bringing it up is sort of, if that's the way that the funding from the state and federal level is going, then so goes our youth services. And if we don't have it fall into those same categories, then we're kind of out of luck. If that.
I think building into that, when we talk about mandates, so the state of Connecticut does require every community to have a youth services bureau and a juvenile review board. So again, that looks differently in every community. Some towns, you know, the Youth Service Bureau is completely volunteered, or other entities within the town take
like
on
the
that.
Boys and Girls Club.
The Boys and Girls Club does it in some communities, et cetera. So we're fortunate that we have a professionally staffed Youth Service Bureau. But again, it is a mandate that every community has those functions. And again, what those Youth Services Bureau offer, again, vary by community and by need of the youth that reside in those towns.
Sure. Great. This question might be, I think, probably for everyone, so it's kind of really a broad question. You can take it wherever you want it to go. So talking about like kind of the amenities and facilities component of your park system, is there anything missing within the community in terms of recreation, amenities, and facilities?
Yeah.
I think Ryan touched on this. There's always a battle for playing fields. No matter how many fields we have between the schools and the park facilities, come springtime when it's rainy and kids are dying to be on the baseball diamond and they're not draining properly, and 2 high schools and middle schools and youth programs, it can get pretty crazy.
I think building on to what
rectangular fields.
I'm sorry, what was that?
More diamond fields than rectangular fields.
Yes, I think so.
And I think building on to what Karen's saying, and I'm sure you're going to hear about it when you talk to girls softball, but girls softball doesn't have a dedicated, playing field, so they're going to talk about that quite a bit, but that's definitely something that's come up pretty consistently with our commission.
However, there is a move to consolidate all 3 of our little leagues, and that might possibly free up space for them. So that's something that definitely should be monitored by this master plan, because we may have a reconfiguration issue on our hands as opposed to an access issue.
Is that something that they're pushing, or you're or the city's pushing? Who's starting that conversation?
District 5 Little League is pushing it, and 2 of the 3 Little Leagues are supporting it. The last one is a holdout, and it would probably go into effect next year if they were able to get them to agree.
And it also just has to do with the amount of populations and speeders. So that comes into it, how many people are participating.
I think that, Austin, what the mayor just said is really probably the biggest challenge right now. Is so, we haven't lost youth over the past 20 or 30 years in this town, yet we have far fewer kids participating in organized events like Little League and those things. I know at the majors level of Little League, they've cut their teams by over half in the past 12 to 15 years. So where are these kids? What are they doing? And how do we reach out to our ever-changing population? I think that's really our challenge now, is evolving with the community and the population, and making sure I heard access issues. Do we have transportation to get people to the parks, to these different events? Do we have things for high school kids? Right now the parks close at sunset, and there's not really a place to go for high school kids and to participate in productive activities. And so, is there ways to have teen centers or night, activities on the weekends at night? Do you have basketball tournaments? I think that would be a huge sell, having 3-on-3 tournaments at the parks, 1, 2, 3 weekends a year, and then have that turn into it. There's a lot of opportunities, I think, that none of us have the answers to. But, as we've changed, we are missing a large portion of our population where kids just aren't involved in anything, whether it's because of funding, finances, transportation, or just knowledge of what we offer.
Sure. Okay.
I'll say one of the things, and again, I'm sure our recreation staff would speak heavily to this, but you know, lack of indoor space is always kind of a challenge, particularly gym space to run select programs.
I was hearing a heartbeat there for a little bit, or something flatlining or something. I was like, for me, is it?
Ominous.
Indoor space, and then particularly gym space. I heard.
I think he said activities for older children as well. Or evening, I guess. I don't know if Renee or Ethan in particular, are there any amenities, facilities that you guys think are missing?
Like anything you've done in another town that you're like, oh, why don't we have, you know, a roller derby rink in Bristol? Stuff like that, ice skating rink.
Personally, no. I think everything is there that like I would need. I mean, yeah, it's as simple as that. I don't really see anything missing.
Yeah, I agree. There's not really like a lot that's like not here. Like we kind of have everything that like I would need at least.
I do know over by Lake Ave, the sand volleyball courts are very, very popular in the summer.
Yeah.
I don't know if, you know, putting more of those courts elsewhere geographically so it's easier for other youth and families to get to. They're always packed and people are always waiting for games. So, you know, that may be an option for Rockwell and or Page as well.
I think more open space too, more trail systems. You know, we have Rockwell, we have Roberts property, Hopper's Pond, you know, Pine Lake has some, but not really a robust trail system. Like right next door in the town of Burlington, there's Sessions Woods, which is a state-owned park, and that's a really, really well-trafficked site. So again, I know we can't grow forests in Bristol, but just something to kind of put out there. I think more opportunities for passive recreation is always a good thing.
No, and honestly, there are some there are departments out there sometimes in the master plan that they take the initiative and actually try to adopt a tree canopy percentage as part of the master plan. So I know, you know, it can't grow a forest, but there are things that some communities do that try to move the needle on that, you know, as part of the master plan process. So what about the opposite side? And we started talking about this, like Brian, you mentioned like basketball tournaments and such, but so not facilities or amenities, but programs or experiences. Are there anything that are missing in terms of programs or experiences, or anything that needs enhancement, you know, from the department in terms of recreation?
I think as far as youth services go, when Josh has kind of come on board, is taking some steps to help improve access or awareness of the programs that youth services offers. I think keeping that going would be something that would be important. Parks and recreation programs were online and you could sign up via the internet, but our youth services programs were a little more hidden and harder to figure out, but that's made much more apparent and accessible. So continuing those efforts to make sure people know what they have access to and what we can provide.
Absolutely. Keep enhancing that, keep marketing, keep enhancing that process that's already been, you know, elevated from the past. What else? Programs, services, experiences?
I think we don't have enough programs for teens. We've been trying to turn the needle on that. The past year, we offered a really successful teen night social event that we held in the parks, and that really got a nice crowd every week. But I think more programming for that population is always it should be a priority.
Absolutely. What else?
I think there's a lot of things that go hand in hand. So we do have, like most communities nationwide, there's, substance use and abuse with some of our young people. And so I am by no means an expert there, but, having alternative places for kids to go to participate in substance-free activity. And that's something that the Best for Bristol campaign and the mayor and current administration, as well as Parks, Recreation, Youth and Community Services, has been really spearheading. So that the efforts have been strengthening, and I think will continue to strengthen, and we'll see a difference. So that's just a really big step in the positive direction.
Absolutely.
I'll also add in, I think a deficit that we have that I'd like to see in the next 5 years is a more robust outdoor education and adventure-based programming. So the city of New Haven has a really strong outdoor adventure program where they actually take inner city kids into the woods to learn skills. They do kayaking, archery, nature, bird watching, et cetera. They have a really, like, ice fishing in the winter. So really, like, unique outdoor education experiences. And I think that's an area that we could really capitalize on. And I could see that tying into our Pine Lake Adventure division, if you will.
And I think that also just merges some active and passive recreation opportunities, so allows people to engage in those active recreation activities that we've seen a decline in the last however many years, but also still creates a stewardship in regards to our park system and passive recreation and the importance of passive recreation land and open space.
That's a very good point. It's a very good tie-in. Because, looking at your parks, and there's a lot of beautiful landscaping that you have at your parks with the trees and everything. So it's that tying in the nature and the environment with the programmatic functions. I can really see that as an option. That's going to be something we need to test with your community. What else? Anything else about programs and services?
Going back to Renee and Ethan to really just keep coming back to you, is there anything that you guys as youth, as teens would like to see that we would offer? Or that you wish somewhere in Bristol would be offered?
I have nothing really particular in mind.
Renee, how about you?
No, I can't really think of anything.
So this next question is it could be a meaty question, a little bit of a tough question sometimes. But so thinking about parks, recreation, youth, and community services, what are some of those key problems in the city that you believe this department can help solve? So again, back to Ryan, you're kind of segueing a little bit for me here a little bit, but you start talking about substance abuse. It may not be like the most prevalent challenge that the city is facing, but that is something that Parks and Recreation Services can provide an outlet or an alternative to that kind of thing. So start thinking about this from that perspective. What are some of maybe the key problems or key challenges that maybe are pertaining to youth, or might be broader, because you all have different experiences, that you believe the department can really help solve, or help address? What are those key challenges?
About 2 years ago, the Board of Education started having these community conversations to address diversity, and the mayor, was it about 2 years ago, Ellen, formed a diversity council in the city. As the city becomes more and more diverse, we're struggling to have an understanding and have a fully integrated city. So I think, Parks and Rec and Youth Commission have resources that could definitely be deployed in that effort.
Yeah, those community conversations were great. Carrie Lord from the Centers, I think Center for School Change, her name was, just was a phenomenal facilitator, and the first couple were very beneficial for the hundreds of people that attended. So continuing those types of conversations and eventually allowing those conversations to lead to actions, I think would be a huge positive to gain understanding for those that come from different backgrounds.
Absolutely.
I think one of the things going back to the substance use piece is Bristol City Council did vote about this time last year to become a recovery-friendly community. And our department as a whole has various programs that we've been working towards, but just as the city as a whole, just kind of that mentality of wanting to work towards providing a safe haven for those who are in recovery and providing them with the resources needed to succeed.
I think another key problem and area that Parks, Rec, Youth, and Community Services could come in for is transportation issues and access in the community. I think as downtown continues to be developed and we look at connectivity within the park system, I think that's a area for development.
You all signed on to the, the 10-minute walk campaign or anything like that for level of service or anything?
Yeah. Yes, our mayor has pledged for that. Right. You're on the website, so I hope you did.
That's great. No, that's great because that's going to be an important component of this master plan is to look at that too and create those strategies, those linkages to how we get there too. So that's neat. What else? Any other kind of challenges or social, problems that, you look at this department and say, we can help solve this or we can help alleviate or address this?
Vandalism. Actually, in some of the more secluded areas of the park, parks, that seems to be a recurring issue.
Sure. So that can go to a lot of things. Is it lighting? Is it security, or is it there's a notion out there for crime prevention through environmental design standards or SEPTED standards and how you actually orient and your hedges and your barriers and your sight lines and all that. So, okay, that's a very good point.
I think one of the other things that kind of going off of all of the things that we've been talking about is our homeless population, our population of unstably housed, and that's something that our community services division particularly works on. But I think we also see that a lot of our homeless or unstably housed population ends up in our parks, whether it's for that shelter or for something to do during the day. So I think we're really at the forefront of that and partnering with those community partners. I think we'd be an essential piece to kind of solving some of those problems within our community.
Anything else? So next question here. This is kind of the question that's like help me or help us help you kind of questions. So it's what are the key outcomes that you would like to see come from this planning process? So this is a question that again, as the commission, how can we help you? And then also kind of selfishly, you're an individual as well. How can we help you? So what are some of those key outcomes that, at the end of the day, when we're done with this plan and we're done, we put together the action plan and these are the steps forward for the next 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 years. What are those key outcomes that you want to make sure that you see as part of this plan?
I really like what. Go ahead, Tanya.
We need a planning tool in order to properly fund and plan for improvements, as well as be able to present a plan to the Board of Finance and other elected officials and stakeholders that lays out the premise, the purpose, and the benefits of having a plan. We play a lot of catch-up. We play a lot of deferred maintenance games, and we're constantly throwing money at things in order to Band-Aid them. And I think that's one of the issues that this master plan could really help us get away from and plan in a more thoughtful manner so that we are actually leveraging resources in a much better fashion.
Absolutely.
I mean, the mayor makes a great point, and as well as just the idea of creativity, right? This has been a town and a place that has done things in a very similar manner for a long, long time, and so to have creative solutions to some of the things that you're hearing, I think, is really important for the planning process.
Okay. Outcomes.
Making everything accessible. That's one of the things that kind of it's a big goal. But even when we talk about, just came to mind now. Josh talked about trails earlier, but having some trails that are accessible for those with different abilities. You know, making sure everybody has a chance to use the parks and not, you know, as much of the park as possible is accessible to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. The design standards, universal design, inclusion, and ADA accessibility, everything, the whole 9 yards.
I'll just build into that, Corey. Part of this plan, part of the scope of this plan is looking at developing an ADA transition plan. So the firm is going to be looking at all of our facilities, seeing where the deficiencies are, and helping us develop a plan to address those over the next 10 years.
Key outcomes. Let me ask you this question, and because we talked about a lot of different things here over the last almost hour now. So, what is your long-term vision for parks, recreation, and community services in the next 10 years? So, I mentioned it that this plan is, you know, setting the groundwork and setting the framework, and you know, and the mayor very eloquently articulated, you know, the outcome that is desired from this master plan, and it's multifaceted. You know, what is it that you really want to see done in the next 10 years? And another way of answering this question is, okay, it's April 8th, 2030. It's 10 years from now. I will hope this plan has accomplished this. You know, what is this? I'm trying to make you kind of prioritize a little bit. It could be an amenity, it could be an experience, it could be programs, it could be finances, it could be, you know, deferred maintenance was brought up just a little bit ago. It could be about that. I'm trying to make you prioritize here a little bit. What is your vision for where we are in the next 10 years?
And this can also include like the youth and community services side as well.
Mm-hmm. Somebody's got to have a vision now.
I think just on a broad term, what we're looking for is a unified plan that everyone can really get behind. Everyone understands where we're going and working towards that collectively. I think we have a lot of people that are doing good work, but just kind of, you know, maybe in their own lane. And I'd like to see connectivity towards the whole picture, that we're all collectively working towards the same goal. So that's a big piece. And I know we've tied becoming CAPRA accredited as the vision for the next 10 years to achieve that. I think to the mayor's point about deferred maintenance, I think it'd be nice to get to a point where we're, you know, caught up and we're dealing with things on a real-time basis and not inheriting something where we're catching up for the last 30 years of failed upkeep and, you know, I guess poor, whatever you want to call it.
Not even poor planning,
lack of planning, management, whatever you want to.
Sure.
I think the other thing is, I mean, part of the scope of the master plan, I mean, the RFP went out all before this department merger has happened, but I think the more we look at what other departments are doing around the country and what our department can do, I think really recognizing the fact how interconnected parks, recreation, youth, and community services really are, and that they all play into each other in regards to kind of solving each other's problems and being resources to each other. So I think really, I think April 2030, I'd really like to see them being super cohesive in regards to people see it as a unified front of being able to solve problems that are coming up.
That cohesion is important, as well as the continued partnerships with other entities in town, whether it's the Bristol Boys and Girls Club, whether it's the public school system, or even other privately owned facilities. I think that's really important to kind of consolidate and then provide the most opportunities for our kids. I really liked what Josh said earlier about the more green space and the trails and the ability to just walk and do that as well. There is a major population that kind of leaves town to do those types of activities, myself included. And so to have something that's local, to walk, green space, to hang out, to have, especially at Page Park, would be great in 10 years.
And I think we've seen that prioritization in the past where we've taken amenities that people leave town to go do, whether that's mountain biking or disc golf, and bringing them into town, into our parks. And it's been incredibly successful, both for our residents and bringing people from out of town into Bristol. And so I think some of these other amenities or these walking trails are something that we could see something similar with that. Skate park as well. Go ahead, Karen.
Is there a demographic component to the 10-year master plan? Because what does Bristol look like in 2030 as compared to 2020? I know in my time on the Board of Ed, they kept telling us the birth rate was going down and student population was declining, and that didn't actually happen. So are we looking, like what does the population look like in 2030? Is it old farts like me? Is it little kids?
What a great question, Karen. Austin last week just got us over our demographics and trends for the next 10 years, so he can probably tell you a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. So if you go that direction, and this is let me back up just a little bit. So we put together a lot of actually let me sit on that chart while I explain something to you. Zoom out a little bit. So on that for a second while I explain something. So we put together a lot of technical reports when we do master planning. And so one of the first ones that we do, to your point, is demographic trends. So we are the furthest away that we are from a census. I know we're doing it right now. So what we do is we utilize ESRI, Environmental Systems Research Institute, numbers that basically centers on the last census, but then the American Community Survey annual updates that they pull from market research and surveys and all that fun stuff. And then you project what happened between the census and the last 9 years now, and then you project it forward 5, 10, 15 years. And so we picked these different age segments. So you see 0 to 17. I'll just stick with 2019. We pulled this just a couple months ago, and it's 2019 data, because it doesn't update until June or July every year. So that's why it's 2019. And so 19% of the population is between 0 and 17, 21% between 18 and 34, 27% between 35 and 54, and between 55 and 74, 25% and 8%. So you can see it's a little bit of an aging trend that you're projected to experience moving forward. And again, this is based on if what has happened between 2010 and 2019 is true. This is just that same story projected forward the next 5, 10. And there's a lot of information that we have in the demographic and trends that, about race. We do the same thing about race and how diversifying will occur. This is the white alone population. And so you can see a lot of diversity moving forward over the next 5, 10, 15 years. Something that we brought up, that was brought up earlier. about being cognizant with diversity in our programming and diversity in our community, because again, ethnicity is Hispanic within the population is projected to increase as well. So that's more diversity for you all. And then in the chart, we even provide like what your state is and then what the nation is. So you can even see how your existing percentages distribution of the age categories align with your state. So even your state in general is a little bit more on the older population in terms of the national demographics. So it's important to also look at what your city's doing, but then how does that actually relate to your state and the country? So then you can really figure out how unique or how non-unique, I guess, typical your city is. So this report, again, we just passed it along last week, and we do have a crowdsourcing website that's available for this website. So Josh, we can put these technical reports on the website as they're approved, and so this is a document that you all could then go through at your leisure and really dive into, because throughout the planning process, we'll be developing a lot of these different types of technical reports that are chock full of different types of information. Sorry, didn't mean to derail us a little bit, but that was an interesting question. So, other visions.
I guess my last comment would be, I think I'd like to see us move in a direction where we're really focused on benefits. And just in terms, I guess, being an agency that really tuned into all the challenges that are happening and being able to program, be adaptive with our programs, right? So just because we've done something for the last 10 years, if this year there's new things emerging in the community, that we're able to be responsive and plan appropriately. I don't know any of that.
The almighty important question. Any other questions, concerns, comments, or suggestions for us? Because we always say we can't analyze anything we don't have. So anything that we didn't ask you or anything that you kind of had, crop up in your mind over the last hour that you want to make sure that we either look into or, talk to or, pass along, because again, this is the data gathering portion of our work. And so is there anything else that we need to be aware of as a planning team as we move forward with our data collection process?
Well, I have one thing, and I don't know if it's an issue, but I do think that we need to be cognizant that we are a bigger city and we are surrounded by smaller towns that have the same level of funding that we have, whether it be youth or park and recreation or any of that. So we are massive, and there are a lot of people that so from those smaller surrounding states utilize our services. And I think if we have some flexibility or have a discussion planning wise about what that looks like for the next 5 to 10 years, that we might be able to actualize program participation as well as revenue for certain programs.
What? Hearing none, you can please reach out to Josh and Sarah if anything else kind of crops up in your mind over the next couple of weeks that you're like, oh, this would be good for the planning team to know about or to look into, or you hear something or you see something, please let us know. Reach out to them. We do have the crowdsourcing website that you can go to that's all about the master plan, and there's comment boxes that are there that go directly to emails so that way we can collect that data as well. So please continue to be engaged in this process, and I can't stress it enough that we can't analyze anything we don't have. So if you think of something, let us have it, because we'll look into it. So other than that, I appreciate everybody's time tonight, and appreciate the allowing us to kind of crash the party here a little bit and do this virtually. So thank you for allowing us to do that. And this is the first meeting of many over the next couple of weeks that we'll be setting up virtually, because to Josh's point, we would have been loved to have been there with you in person last month, but literally the week before we were scheduled to be with you all was kind of when everything was kind of really becoming questionable, and so it just didn't make sense to carry forward with it, given what individual states were doing and the federal guidelines were too. So appreciate your flexibility and everything. So Josh, is there anything else that we need to be doing tonight, or are we good here?
You are all set. Thank you, guys. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Austin, Holly, and Mark.
Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it.
Have a good evening.